The scream that tore through the night air sent every horse in the stable into a panic. And Xavier dropped the saddle he had been oiling to sprint toward the hayloft of the barn on the outskirts of Lone Pine, California. The year was 1877, and in all his 32 years living in these Sierra Nevada foothills, he had never heard such a sound of pure terror mixed with exhaustion. His powerful legs carried his muscular frame up the wooden ladder with practiced ease, his long dark hair falling across his broad shoulders as he moved. When he pushed open the loft door, moonlight streamed through the gaps in the wood to illuminate a young woman curled in the hay, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. She could not have been more than 22 or 23 years old, her blonde hair matted with dirt and straw, her dress torn at the hem and covered in dust from what must have been days of travel. Her face was pale except for the angry red marks where branches had scratched her cheeks, and her lips were cracked from dehydration. Isaac stood frozen for a moment, his heart hammering in his chest not from the climb but from the sight of such suffering. He had spent the last 8 years living alone in these mountains, trapping and hunting, coming into town only when he needed supplies. People called him the Mountain Man, and he preferred the company of trees and streams to the noise of civilization, but something about this woman pulled at something deep inside him that he thought had died long ago. "Miss." His voice came out rougher than he intended, like rocks grinding together. "Miss, are you hurt?" Her eyes flew open, revealing irises the color of a summer sky, wide with fear. She scrambled backward in the hay, pressing herself against the wall of the barn. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. "Please do not send me back. I would rather die here in this hay than go back to that place." Isaac raised his hands slowly, showing her his palms in a gesture of peace. "Nobody is sending you anywhere you do not want to go, but you look like you have not had water in days. Will you let me help you?" She studied him with those blue eyes, taking in his size, the muscles that strained against his worn cotton shirt, the way his buckskin pants were stained from life in the wilderness. Most women looked at him with either fear or disgust, seeing only a wild man who had turned his back on proper society. But this woman seemed to be searching for something else, some sign of whether she could trust him. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she gave the smallest nod. "My name is Xavier," he said softly, moving slowly as if approaching a wounded deer. "I have a camp about 5 miles up in the mountains, but first let me get you some water and food. Can you tell me your name?" "Katherine," she whispered. "Katherine Kimball. I came from Nevada, from Virginia City. I have been walking for 6 days. 6 days." Isaac felt anger surge through him at the thought of what could have driven a young woman to walk alone through the dangerous wilderness between Virginia City and the California foothills. The distance was over 100 miles through territory that would challenge even experienced men. That she had survived at all spoke to either incredible luck or fierce determination, probably both. "Wait here," he said. "I am going to get water from the trough and some food from my saddlebag. Then we can talk about what happens next." He descended the ladder quickly, his mind racing. The barn belonged to old Samuel Porter, who let travelers use it for a small fee. Isaac had been planning to head back up to his cabin in the morning after selling his winter pelts, but those plans had just changed dramatically. He filled a tin cup with cool water from the trough, grabbed the wrapped package of dried meat and bread from his supplies, and climbed back up to find Katherine exactly where he had left her. She drank the water so fast he worried she might make herself sick. "Slowly," he cautioned. "Your body needs time to adjust." Katherine lowered the cup, water dripping down her chin. Up close, Isaac could see that beneath the dirt and exhaustion, she was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with carefully arranged hair or fancy dresses. Her beauty came from the strength in her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes, the way she held herself even when clearly terrified. "Thank you," she said, her voice already sounding stronger. "You must think I am insane, running away like some foolish girl from a novel." "I think you are brave," Isaac replied, surprising himself with the honesty in his words. 6 days through that country would kill most men. Whatever you were running from must have been worse than the wilderness. Katherine laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My father sold me." Can you imagine? In 1877 in America, my own father sold me to a man named Marcus Thornton to settle his gambling debts. Marcus was 53 years old, mean as a rattlesnake, and he told me I had better learn to be an obedient wife, or he would teach me with his belt. The wedding was supposed to be 2 weeks ago. The bread Isaac had been holding crumbled in his fist as his hand clenched involuntarily. "You ran on your wedding day, the night before. I climbed out my window with nothing but the dress on my back and started walking west. I figured California or death, and honestly I was fine with either option." She took another sip of water, this time slower. "I hid during the days and walked at night when I could. Ate berries and drank from streams. Got lost more times than I can count. But I kept going because going back was not an option." Isaac sat down in the hay across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Your father will be looking for you. This Marcus Thornton, too, I would imagine." "I know." Fear flickered across her face. "That is why I need to keep moving. I thought maybe I could find work in Sacramento or San Francisco, somewhere I could disappear. But I was so tired when I reached this town tonight. I just needed a few hours of sleep before continuing, and this barn seemed safe." "You cannot go to Sacramento or San Francisco," Isaac said, the words coming out before he had fully thought them through. "Those are the first places they will look. Mining towns are full of men who knew your father, who would recognize you or turn you in for a reward." Katherine's face crumbled. "Then where can I go? I have no money, no family except a father who sold me like livestock. I have nothing." Isaac looked at this woman, this Katherine Kimball who had walked through hell rather than accept a fate she did not choose, and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Come with me to my cabin. It is high in the mountains off any trail. Nobody comes up there except me. You can stay until we figure out what to do next." "Why would you help me?" Katherine's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You do not know me. For all you know, I am a liar or a thief." "Maybe," Isaac acknowledged, "but I do not think so, and I cannot leave you here to be found. Call it mountain hospitality." The ghost of a smile crossed Katherine's face. "Mountain hospitality, is that what they call it?" "That is what I call it." Isaac stood, his tall frame casting a shadow across the hay. "We should leave before dawn. Are you strong enough to ride?" "I walked over 100 miles. I can manage a horse." "Then rest for a few more hours. I will keep watch and make sure nobody disturbs you. When the first light touches the sky, we head into the mountains." Katherine looked like she wanted to argue to question him more, but exhaustion won out. She curled back into the hay, and within minutes, her breathing had evened out into sleep. Isaac climbed back down the ladder and positioned himself where he could watch both the barn and the main road. His mind whirled with the implications of what he had just agreed to do. Harboring a runaway woman could bring trouble to his doorstep, especially if her father or this Marcus Thornton came looking with the law on their side. But as he sat there in the darkness, remembering the desperation in Katherine's eyes, the way her voice had broken when she said her father had sold her, Isaac knew he would make the same choice again. He had lived alone for 8 years. ever since he had come west from Missouri after his own family had been killed in a raid during the final days of the war. He had built his cabin with his own hands, learned to survive in the wilderness, and convinced himself he needed no one. Yet watching Katherine sleep, even from a distance, made him realize how lonely those years had been. The hours passed slowly. Isaac watched the stars wheel overhead, listened to the sounds of the night, and thought about the woman sleeping in the hayloft. When the eastern sky began to lighten from black to deep blue, he climbed back up to wake her. Katherine jerked awake at his touch, her body tensing until she remembered where she was. "Time to go," Isaac said quietly. "There is a water pump behind the barn where you can wash your face if you want. I will get the horses ready." 10 minutes later, they were mounted and heading east into the mountains, away from the town, and toward the wilderness that Isaac called home. Katherine sat on the horse with surprising grace despite her exhaustion, and Isaac kept them at a steady pace that would cover ground without exhausting the animals. They rode in silence for the first hour, the only sounds the creak of leather and the soft thud of hooves on the dirt trail. As the sun rose higher and they climbed into the foothills, the landscape transformed around them. Lone pine disappeared behind them, and they entered a world of towering pines, rocky outcroppings, and streams that tumbled down from the high peaks. The air grew cooler and cleaner with each mile, carrying the scent of sap and wildflowers. Isaac watched Katherine take in the scenery, saw the tension slowly ease from her shoulders as they left civilization behind. "It is beautiful up here," she said finally, the first words either of them had spoken since leaving the barn. "I have never seen anything like it." "The mountains are honest," Isaac replied. "They do not lie or cheat or sell their children for gambling debts. They just are what they are." Katherine turned to look at him. "You really have been up here alone for 8 years, more or less. I go into town maybe 4 times a year for supplies and to sell pelts. The rest of the time it is just me and the wilderness. Does it not get lonely?" Isaac considered the question. "Sometimes. But people can be cruel in ways that mountains never are. After what I saw during the war, after what happened to my family, I needed the quiet. Needed to be somewhere I could hear myself think." "What happened to your family?" Katherine's voice was gentle, not prying. "Jayhawkers came through during the border wars. My father tried to defend our farm. He and my mother and my little sister Hannah, they all died that day. I was 18, away in town getting supplies. By the time I got back, it was too late to do anything but bury them." Isaac surprised himself by telling her this. He had not spoken about his family to anyone in years. "I headed west after that, figured I had nothing left to stay for. I am sorry." And Katherine sounded like she meant it. "It seems we both know what it is like to have family fail us, just in different ways." They rode for 3 more hours, climbing higher into the mountains until they were following a narrow trail that looked like nothing more than a deer path. Isaac led them through a grove of aspens, across a meadow filled with purple lupines, and finally to a clearing beside a rushing creek. There, nestled against the mountainside with the forest surrounding it like a protective embrace, stood Isaac's cabin. It was a simple structure, built from logs he had cut and hewn himself, with a stone chimney and a roof made of split shakes. A small porch ran along the front, and nearby stood a lean-to for the horses. Behind the cabin, the mountain rose steeply, and in front, the creek provided fresh water and the music of its constant flow. To Katherine, after days of walking through the wilderness and a lifetime lived in dusty mining towns, it looked like something from a dream. "This is your home?" she asked as Isaac helped her dismount. "For the last 8 years. He could not quite keep the pride from his voice. "Built every bit of it myself. The walls are thick enough to keep out the winter cold, and the location stays cool in summer. The creek never runs dry, and there is good hunting all around. Katherine walked slowly toward the cabin, taking in every detail. Isaac had built it solid and true, with tight joints and carefully fitted logs. The porch was swept clean, and firewood was stacked neatly under a covered section. Through the window, she could see simple furniture inside, all of it handmade but well crafted. It was the home of a man who took care of what was his, who built things to last. "Come inside," Isaac said, opening the door. "You must be exhausted." The interior of the cabin was surprisingly spacious. One main room with a sleeping loft above. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, with cooking utensils hanging from iron hooks. A table and 2 chairs sat near the window, and shelves lined the walls holding supplies, books, and various tools. The floor was made of smooth planks, not just packed earth, and everything was organized with military precision. "You can take the bed," Isaac said, gesturing to a frame in the corner with a mattress filled with pine needles and covered with furs. "I will sleep in the loft." "I cannot take your bed," Katherine protested. "You can and you will. You are a guest in my home, and guests get the bed. Besides, I sleep in the loft half the time anyway. Warmer up there in the winter." Isaac moved to the fireplace and began building a fire. "Are you hungry? I have venison stew I made yesterday, still good." Katherine sat down in one of the chairs, feeling the exhaustion of the last 6 days finally catching up with her now that she was somewhere safe. "I should help you. You should rest. When is the last time you actually slept, really slept, without worrying about being found or attacked by a bear?" "I cannot remember." Katherine watched him work, noticed the easy way he moved despite his size, the competence in every gesture. His arms were thick with muscle from years of chopping wood and hauling water, his back broad under his shirt. He wore his hair longer than was fashionable, tied back with a leather cord, and several days' worth of beard shadowed his jaw. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who had been forged by the wilderness into something strong and solid. Isaac heated the stew over the fire and served it in wooden bowls he had carved himself. They ate in comfortable silence, and Katherine realized it was the first real meal she had eaten in a week. The venison was tender, the broth rich with herbs and vegetables, and she found herself eating until her bowl was empty. "Thank you," she said, setting the bowl down, "for all of this. The food, the shelter, the kindness. I know I am bringing trouble to your door." "Maybe," Isaac acknowledged, taking her bowl to rinse it in a bucket of water. "But it is trouble I chose to invite in. You do not owe me anything, Katherine. You are safe here, and you can stay as long as you need." Katherine felt tears sting her eyes. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not even know me." Isaac turned to face her, his expression serious. "Because 8 years ago I needed help and nobody gave it. Because you were brave enough to choose freedom over comfort. Because leaving you in that barn to be found would have haunted me for the rest of my life." He paused. "And maybe because it has been a long time since I had someone to talk to who was not a horse or a tree." That drew a small laugh from Katherine. "Well, I promise to be better conversation than a tree at least. The bar is pretty low. Trees are terrible conversationalists." Isaac smiled, and the expression transformed his rugged face into something almost boyish. "Now you should rest. Tomorrow we can figure out what comes next." Katherine stood and moved toward the bed, then paused. "Isaac, thank you, I mean it. You are welcome, Katherine." She laid down on the bed, still wearing her torn dress, and pulled one of the fur blankets over herself. Through the window, she could see the afternoon sun filtering through the pine trees, could hear the creek singing its endless song. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt safe. Her eyes closed and she drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. Isaac watched her for a moment, then quietly gathered supplies and headed outside. There was work to be done, always work on a mountain homestead, and having a guest meant he needed to think about things he normally did not worry about. Privacy, for one. The cabin had been built for a solitary man, and having a woman staying there complicated things. He would need to rig up some kind of curtain to give her private space, and they would need more food, more supplies. But as he went about his chores, checking the traps, gathering firewood, tending the small garden he kept behind the cabin, Isaac found himself thinking about Katherine, about the way she had laughed despite everything she had been through, about the strength it must have taken to walk over 100 miles through wilderness alone, about the blue of her eyes and the way her voice sounded when she said his name. He shook his head, trying to clear those thoughts. She was a woman in trouble who needed help, nothing more. The last thing she needed was him developing feelings that would only complicate an already difficult situation. Still, as the sun began to set and he headed back to the cabin, Isaac could not quite ignore the way his heart had lifted when she smiled at him. Katherine slept through the rest of that day and all through the night. When she finally woke, sunlight was streaming through the window, and she could hear Isaac moving around outside. She sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings with fresh eyes. The cabin was even more impressive in full daylight. Every log was carefully fitted, every surface smooth and clean. Books lined one shelf, actual books, their spines worn from reading. She stood and moved closer to see the titles: Whitman, Thoreau, Shakespeare, Homer. This mountain man was educated then, not just some rough trapper. Katherine opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. Isaac was at the creek, filling buckets with water. He had stripped off his shirt in the morning warmth, and Katherine felt her breath catch at the sight of him. His back was a landscape of muscle, his shoulders broad as an ox yoke, his arms thick and powerful. Scars marked his skin here and there, evidence of a hard life, but they only added to the sense of strength and capability he projected. As if sensing her gaze, Isaac turned and saw her. He grabbed his shirt and pulled it back on, though not before Katherine noticed the flush that colored his neck. "You are awake. How do you feel?" "Better. Much better, actually." Katherine walked down to meet him by the creek. "I think I slept for nearly 18 hours. You needed it." "Your body was exhausted." Isaac carried the buckets back toward the cabin. "There is a place upstream where you can bathe if you want, behind those rocks. Complete privacy. The water is cold but clean." The thought of washing away 6 days of dirt and fear was almost overwhelming. "That sounds wonderful, but I have nothing to change into." Isaac set the buckets down and rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture Katherine was beginning to recognize as a sign of discomfort. "I have some spare clothes. They will be too big, but you can roll up the sleeves and legs." "Better than what you have on now." "You do not have to do that. Katherine, your dress is torn in 3 places and covered in bloodstains. You need clothes. It is practical, not charity." His voice was firm but kind. Katherine looked down at herself and had to admit he was right. The dress she had worn for 6 days was beyond repair. "All right, thank you." Isaac disappeared into the cabin and returned with a set of clothes: a cotton shirt, buckskin pants, and a belt. "These are my spare set. Like I said, they will be big, but they are clean." Katherine took the clothes and a piece of soap Isaac offered her, then followed his directions to the bathing spot upstream. Behind a natural barrier of rocks, the creek widened into a small pool. The water was indeed cold, fed by snowmelt from higher peaks, but after so many days of travel, Katherine did not care. She stripped off her ruined dress and waded in, gasping at the temperature but pushing forward until she could submerge completely. She scrubbed every inch of skin, washed her hair twice, and let the cold water soothe the scratches and blisters that covered her feet and legs. When she finally emerged and dried herself on the blanket Isaac had included with the clothes, she felt almost human again. The shirt and pants were indeed far too large, but she rolled up the cuffs and cinched the belt tight and they would do. Her wet hair she braided down her back, and she left her ruined dress folded on a rock. When she returned to the cabin, Isaac was cooking breakfast. He glanced up as she entered, and something flickered in his eyes before he looked quickly back to the pan. "You look more comfortable. I feel like a new person." Katherine sat at the table. "I cannot remember the last time I felt this clean." Isaac served eggs and strips of bacon onto 2 plates. "The chickens are actually wild turkeys I have been taming. They lay eggs most mornings. The bacon is from a wild pig I smoked last month." "You do all this yourself? The hunting, the cooking, everything?" When you live alone, you either learn to do everything or you do not survive. I taught myself to cook, to sew, to preserve food, to doctor myself when I am sick or injured. The mountains demand competence. They ate breakfast while the morning light grew stronger outside. Katherine asked questions about how Isaac lived, and he answered them patiently, explaining his routines, his methods for preserving meat and vegetables, how he predicted weather and planned for the harsh winters. His life was one of careful planning and hard work, but there was a contentment in the way he spoke about it that Katherine envied. "What about you?" Isaac asked finally. "You said your father was in Virginia City. What was your life like before all this?" Katherine's face darkened. "Not much of a life, really. My mother died when I was young and my father worked the mines. When he was not working, he was gambling or drinking. I kept house for him, cooked and cleaned and tried to keep us afloat. I thought maybe one day I could save enough to leave, to build my own life somewhere. But then he lost big to Marcus Thornton, more money than he could ever repay. And Marcus offered a solution. He would forgive the debt if my father gave him my hand in marriage. And your father agreed." Isaac's voice was flat, but Katherine could hear the anger underneath. "Without even asking me. He came home and told me I was getting married in 2 weeks, that I should be grateful Marcus was willing to take me. When I protested, he struck me and told me I was being selfish. That is when I knew I had to run." Isaac stood abruptly and walked to the window, his hands clenched into fists. "Men like that make me ashamed of my gender, to treat your own daughter as property, as something to be traded away." "Not all men," Katherine said softly. "You have been nothing but kind and respectful to me." He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made Katherine's heart skip. "You deserve respect. You deserve to make your own choices about your life. What your father did, what he tried to force you into, it was wrong. And I give you my word that as long as you are here, nobody will force you to do anything against your will. Not him, not Marcus Thornton, not anyone. I believe you." And Katherine realized she did. Despite knowing this man for barely a day, she trusted him in a way she had never trusted her own father. The days settled into a routine after that. Katherine helped with the daily chores, learning how to tend the garden, preserve food, and manage the various tasks that mountain living demanded. Isaac taught her how to fish in the creek, how to identify edible plants, how to read the weather in the clouds. She proved to be a quick learner, and Isaac found himself enjoying having someone to share his knowledge with. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk. Katherine told him about growing up in mining towns, about the books she had read in stolen moments when her father was away, about the dreams she had harbored of seeing the ocean or traveling to San Francisco. Isaac told her about his childhood in Missouri, about his sister Hannah who had loved to sing, about the horrors of the war years and the aftermath that had driven him west. I wanted to disappear, he admitted one night as they watched the stars come out. To become nobody, just another man in the wilderness. I thought if I could be alone enough, work hard enough, the memories would fade. Did they? Katherine asked. Not really. You cannot outrun grief, I learned. You can only learn to live with it. The mountains did not erase my pain, but they gave me a place to heal where nobody was demanding I pretend to be fine. Katherine reached over and touched his hand, the first time she had deliberately initiated contact with him. I am glad you came to Lone Pine when you did. Glad you found me in that barn. Isaac looked at where her hand rested on his, small and pale against his sun-darkened skin. So am I. Strange how life works sometimes. I went into town planning to sell pelts and be back up here alone by nightfall. Instead, I found you. Do you regret it? Having me here, I mean. I know it must be an adjustment after being alone so long. No, Isaac's voice was firm. I do not regret it at all. Actually, I keep thinking how quiet it will be once you leave. Katherine withdrew her hand, suddenly unsure of herself. I should start thinking about that. About where I will go next. I cannot hide up here forever. Why not? Isaac asked, then seemed surprised by his own question. I mean not hide, but why not stay, at least for a while longer, until we know it is safe for you to travel, until you have a real plan for where you want to go. Isaac, I cannot impose on you indefinitely. You did not ask for a permanent house guest. You are not imposing. You pull your weight with the chores, you are good company, and honestly, this cabin feels more like a home with you in it than it has in all the years I have lived here alone. Katherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. Over the past 2 weeks, she had found herself growing more comfortable with Isaac, more aware of him not just as her rescuer but as a man. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness in his huge hands when he handled delicate tasks, the sound of his laugh when she said something that amused him. She noticed, and she tried not to let herself feel what she was starting to feel, because she had just escaped one man trying to control her life. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for another, but Isaac was nothing like Marcus Thornton or her father. He asked her opinion on things. He listened when she spoke. He had never once tried to touch her inappropriately or made her feel unsafe. If anything, he maintained almost too much distance, always careful to respect her space. Can I ask you something? Katherine said suddenly. Anything. Why have you never married? I know you said you came out here to be alone, but that was 8 years ago. Surely in all that time you must have met women in town. Isaac was quiet for a long moment. I did meet women. Some even made it clear they would be interested if I asked, but I never felt right about it. The life I have up here, it is a hard life. Cold winters, long hours of work, isolation from everything. It would not be fair to ask a woman to share that unless she really understood what she was choosing. And most women I met in town, they wanted civilization. Regular church services, neighbors, shops, social gatherings. All the things that drove me away in the first place. So you just decided to be alone forever. I decided I would rather be alone than settle for something that was not right. My parents, before they died, they had something special. Real partnership, real love. I figured if I could not have that, I would rather have solitude. He turned to look at her. What about you? Did you ever think about marriage before your father tried to force you into it? Katherine considered the question. I used to dream about it when I was younger, meeting someone kind who would take me away from my father's house. But as I got older, I realized that most men I met saw women as either property or burden. The miners wanted women to cook and clean and warm their beds. The prosperous men wanted wives as decorations to show off. I never met anyone who seemed interested in me as a person, as someone with thoughts and dreams of my own. That is their loss, Isaac said quietly. You are smart and strong and brave. Any man would be lucky to have you choose him. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Katherine felt her breath catch, saw Isaac lean slightly toward her before he caught himself and pulled back. The moment stretched and then broke as Isaac stood abruptly. I should check the trap line before it gets full dark, he said, his voice rougher than usual. I will be back in an hour or so. Katherine watched him stride away into the forest and wrapped her arms around herself. She was falling for him. Despite every logical reason not to, despite the complicated situation, despite having known him for barely 2 weeks, she was falling for Isaac Xavier. And she had the distinct impression he might be feeling the same way, which both thrilled and terrified her. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Katherine was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard horses approaching. She looked up to see Isaac emerging from the forest where he had been checking his traps, his whole body suddenly tense and alert. 2 men on horseback were coming up the trail toward the cabin, and even from a distance, Katherine could see they wore badges on their vests. Inside, Isaac said quietly but firmly. Stay away from the windows. Katherine did not argue. She hurried into the cabin and positioned herself where she could peek out without being seen. Her heart hammered in her chest. Had they found her? Had her father or Marcus Thornton sent the law after her? Isaac stood in front of the cabin, arms crossed over his chest, as the 2 lawmen approached. They reined in their horses, and the older one, a man with a silver mustache and tired eyes, touched the brim of his hat, mourning. You Isaac Xavier? I am. What brings the law all the way up here, Sheriff? Sheriff Tom Brennan from Lone Pine. This is Deputy Harris. We are looking for a missing woman. Katherine Kimball from Virginia City. Her father reported her missing about 2 weeks ago. We got word she might have passed through Lone Pine. Isaac's face remained carefully neutral. I do not follow town gossip much, Sheriff. Like I said, what brings you up to my cabin specifically? Just checking all the homesteads in the area. Her father is real worried about her. Says she ran off the night before her wedding, might not be in her right mind. Thinking maybe she got lost in the mountains, might have sought shelter somewhere. You seen any sign of a young woman? Blonde hair, about 22 years old. Can I ask you something, Sheriff? Isaac's voice was casual, but his eyes were sharp. This father who is so worried, what kind of man sells his daughter to settle gambling debts? The sheriff's expression flickered. So you did see her. I asked you a question first. Sheriff Brennan sighed and shifted in his saddle. Look, Xavier, I do not know all the details of the situation. What I know is that a man reported his daughter missing, and I am obligated to look for her. Now, is she here or not? Let me ask you another question, Isaac said, his stance widening slightly, his muscles tensing in a way that made him look even more formidable. If you found her, what would you do? Take her back to Virginia City? Deliver her to a father who treats her like property and a husband she never agreed to marry? That is not really my call to make. I am just here to make sure she is safe and return her to her family. Her family, Isaac repeated, his voice hard now. You mean the man who struck her when she protested being sold to pay his debts? The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Xavier, I do not want trouble. If the girl is here and she is safe, that is what matters. But I need to see her, need to know she is all right. Inside the cabin, Katherine made a decision. She could let Isaac face this alone, let him lie for her and possibly get in trouble with the law. Or she could face this herself, make her own choice about what happened next. She had run away to claim her freedom, to make her own decisions. Now was the time to prove she meant it. She opened the cabin door and stepped out onto the porch. Both lawmen straightened in their saddles as they saw her. "I am Katherine Kimball," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And I am exactly where I want to be." Sheriff Brennan removed his hat. "Miss Kimball, your father has been very worried. He asked us to bring you home safe." "My father was worried about losing the deal he made with Marcus Thornton, you mean?" "Sheriff, I am 23 years old, not a child. I left of my own free will, and I have no intention of returning to Virginia City." "Miss, I understand you might be upset about the marriage arrangement, but running away alone through the wilderness, that is dangerous. You could have been killed." "I could have been," Katherine agreed, moving to stand beside Isaac, "but I was not. And I would rather take my chances with the mountains than be forced into marriage with a man I do not love and do not choose." Deputy Harris, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "The law says a father has authority over his daughter until she is married. The law also says slavery is abolished, but my father tried to sell me like I was a slave," Katherine shot back. "I will not go back, Sheriff. You cannot make me." Sheriff Brennan looked between Katherine and Isaac, seeming to measure the situation. Isaac had not moved, but his entire posture radiated protection, making it clear without words that anyone who tried to take Katherine against her will would have to go through him first. "Miss Kimball," the sheriff said finally, "are you here of your own free will? Has Mr. Xavier hurt you or coerced you in any way?" "No," Katherine said firmly. "Isaac saved my life. He gave me shelter and asked nothing in return. I am here because I choose to be here. And if I insist you come with us, at least to give a statement in town, then you will have to drag me, Sheriff, and I will fight every step of the way. And I think Mr. Xavier might have something to say about that." Isaac finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "The lady has made her choice clear, Sheriff. I suggest you respect it." Sheriff Brennan studied them for another long moment, then sighed deeply. "Deputy Harris, make a note. We rode up to Xavier's cabin. No sign of Katherine Kimball. Searched the area, found nothing." The deputy looked confused. "But Sheriff, she is right there." "I do not see anyone except Mr. Xavier. Must be that the altitude is affecting your vision, deputy. Let us head back down the mountain." Understanding dawned on the deputy's face. "Yes, sir. Nothing up here but trees and a mountain man." The sheriff put his hat back on and tipped it to Isaac. "Take care of yourself, Xavier. And whoever you do not have staying with you, make sure she stays safe and out of sight for a while. There are some men from Virginia City asking questions in town, and they do not have my scruples about respecting a woman's choices." "Understood, Sheriff." "I appreciate the warning. I never liked Marcus Thornton anyway," the sheriff said, gathering his reins. "Man is mean as a snake and twice as crooked. If someone were to escape marrying him, I would consider that a public service." He nodded once more, then turned his horse and headed back down the trail, his deputy following. Katherine and Isaac stood motionless until the sound of hooves had faded completely. Then Katherine's knees went weak, and she grabbed for the porch railing to steady herself. Isaac was beside her in an instant, his hand supporting her elbow. "Are you all right?" "I think so. I cannot believe the sheriff just did that. He lied for us." "He is a good man, Sheriff Brennan, but he also gave us a warning. There are men in town looking for you, men who will not be as willing to look the other way. We need to be careful." Katherine turned to face him, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how his hand was still on her arm. "Isaac, I am putting you in danger. If Marcus or my father find out you are hiding me, they could come after you. Let them try." Isaac's jaw was set, his eyes fierce. "I meant what I said before, Katherine. Nobody is going to force you to do anything against your will, not while I am breathing. But why? Why are you risking so much for me?" The question hung in the air between them. Isaac's hand slid from her elbow down to her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping gently around hers. "Because in the 2 weeks you have been here, I have laughed more than I have in 8 years. Because you make this cabin feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep. Because when I look at you, I see strength and kindness and courage, and I think maybe I have been alone long enough." Catherine's breath caught. "Isaac." "I am not good with words," he continued, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "I have spent too many years alone, talking to trees and horses, but I need you to know that having you here, it has changed something in me. It has reminded me that being alone and being safe are not the same thing as being happy." "I feel it too," Katherine whispered. "I tried to tell myself I was just grateful for your help, but it is more than that. When you are near me, I feel safe in a way I have never felt before. And when you are gone, even just to check the traps, I find myself watching for you to come back." Isaac raised his free hand slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and cupped her cheek. "I want you to stay, not just until it is safe to leave, but stay. Build a life here with me. But I will not ask that of you until you have had time to be free, to make a choice without fear or pressure forcing your hand." "What if I have already made my choice?" Katherine leaned into his touch, her heart soaring. "What if I told you that these past 2 weeks have shown me what a partnership can be? That you treat me like an equal, like someone whose thoughts and opinions matter? What if I said I want to stay, not because I am running from something, but because I am running toward you?" Isaac's other hand came up to frame her face, and he leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to stop him. When their lips met, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. Katherine felt like something in her chest was breaking open, all the fear and pain of the past months cracking apart to let in light and hope. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the thunder of his heartbeat under her palms. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to ask you something, but you do not have to answer right away. Take time, think about it, be sure. All right, this life up here, it is hard. Cold winters where we will be snowed in for weeks at a time. Hot summers with hard work from dawn to dusk. No shops or social gatherings or any of the comforts of town. It is just me and you and the wilderness. Can you be happy with that? Because I need you to be sure before we go any further. I will not have you feeling trapped, even here." Katherine pulled back enough to look into his eyes. "Isaac, I walked over 100 miles through dangerous territory to escape a life I did not choose. I am not afraid of hard work or isolation. What I am afraid of is going back to being someone's property, someone's burden. With you, I am Katherine, just myself, and that is worth more than all the comforts of town could ever be." "Then stay," Isaac said simply. "Stay with me and we will build a life together. A real partnership, just like you said." "I will stay," Katherine promised, "for as long as you will have me." They kissed again, longer this time, and Katherine felt all the pieces of her new life falling into place. She had run into the wilderness seeking freedom and found something better. A home, a partner, a future built on choice and respect and love, but their peace was short-lived. 3 days later, Isaac returned from checking his trap lines to find Katherine white-faced and shaking on the porch. "Someone was here. I heard horses while you were gone, saw them through the window. 4 men, rough-looking. They did not come up to the cabin, just circled around and left, but Isaac, I think they were scouting, figuring out the layout." Isaac's expression went hard. "Go inside and pack essentials in a bag. Food, warm clothes, the blankets from the bed. Do it now." "What are you going to do?" "I am going to make sure that if they come back, we are ready. If they are scouting today, they will probably return tomorrow or the next day." That gives us time to prepare. Isaac spent the rest of the daylight hours preparing defenses. He moved extra ammunition into the cabin, positioned his rifle and his revolver where they could be easily reached, and set up a series of simple alarms around the perimeter using string and tin cans that would make noise if disturbed. Katherine watched him work, her stomach churning with worry and guilt. "This is my fault," she said. "You should have let the sheriff take me." Isaac stopped what he was doing and crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. "Katherine, listen to me. This is not your fault. The fault lies with your father for selling you and with Marcus Thornton for thinking he could buy you. You did nothing wrong by choosing freedom. But I have brought danger to your door. Then we will face it together. I have faced danger before and survived. But this time, I have something worth fighting for." He kissed her forehead. "We are going to be all right, I promise you." That night, they kept the cabin dark and took turns keeping watch. Katherine tried to stay awake but eventually dozed in the chair, only to jerk awake at Isaac's touch on her shoulder. "There is someone out there," he whispered. "4 of them, moving through the trees. They think we are asleep." Katherine's heart leaped into her throat. "What do we do?" "You stay inside, away from the windows. I am going out there to talk to them. With any luck, I can convince them to leave peacefully." "And if you cannot?" Isaac's face was grim in the darkness. "Then I will do what I have to do to protect what is mine." He slipped out the door before Katherine could protest, and she positioned herself where she could see through a crack in the shutters. The moon was bright enough that she could make out shapes moving in the clearing. Isaac stood on the porch, his rifle held loosely but ready, as 4 men on horses emerged from the tree line. The man in front was older, maybe in his 50s, with a cruel mouth and cold eyes. Even from a distance, Katherine recognized him. "Marcus Thornton." "Xavier," Marcus called out. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Nothing here belongs to you, Thornton. Turn around and ride out." "The girl, Katherine Kimball. Her father sold her to me fair and square, and I intend to collect what I paid for." "Katherine Kimball is not here," Isaac said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "Sheriff Brennan already came by and searched, found nothing." "I do not believe you. One of my men saw a woman in the window 3 days ago. Blonde hair, right age, that is her." "Your man was mistaken." "Now leave my property before I make you leave." Marcus laughed, an ugly sound. "You are 1 man against 4 of us, mountain man. You cannot win this fight. Just hand over the girl and we will leave peaceful." "I told you there is no girl here." "But even if there was, I would not hand over a woman to a man who thinks he can buy her like livestock. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to turn those horses around and ride back to wherever you came from, and you are going to forget Katherine Kimball ever existed." "Or what?" Isaac raised his rifle slightly. "Or I start shooting and I do not miss. Your choice, Thornton." For a long moment the 5 men faced off in the moonlight. Katherine held her breath, her hands clenched so tight her nails cut into her palms. Then one of Marcus's men, younger than the others, moved his hand toward his gun. Isaac's rifle cracked once, and the hat flew off the young man's head. "Next shot is not a warning. Leave. Now." "You are making a mistake, Xavier," Marcus snarled. "I will come back with more men, with the law that will actually do their job. You cannot protect her forever." "Maybe not forever, but I can protect her tonight. And tomorrow I will do it again, and the day after that. However long it takes for you to understand that she is not yours and never will be. Now get off my land before I decide to stop being polite." Marcus stared at Isaac for another long moment, then spat into the dirt. "This is not over. Come on, boys. We will be back with proper authority." The 4 men turned their horses and disappeared back into the forest. Isaac held his position on the porch until the sound of hoofbeats had faded completely, then lowered his rifle and came back inside. Katherine flew into his arms. "You could have been killed," she said, her face pressed against his chest. "But I was not. They were testing me, seeing if I would fold. Now they know I will not." Isaac held her tight, but Marcus was right about one thing. He will be back, and next time he might bring the kind of law that will not look the other way. We need to think about the future. "What do you mean?" Isaac pulled back to look at her. "If you were married, Marcus would have no claim on you. Your father's contract would be void. You would be legally protected." Catherine's breath caught. "Isaac, are you asking?" "I know it is fast. I know we have barely known each other a month, but Katherine, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I want you to be my wife. Not because of Marcus or your father or any legal protection, but because when I think about my future, you are in every single part of it." Tears filled Catherine's eyes. "But you said I should not have to choose because of fear or pressure." "Then do not choose because of fear. Choose because you want to. And if you need more time, if you want to wait until all this is settled and you can choose with a clear heart, I will wait, however long it takes." Katherine looked up at this man who had saved her, protected her, treated her with respect and kindness, and saw her future written in his eyes. "I do not need more time. I choose you, Isaac Xavier. I choose this life, this cabin, this partnership. I choose us. Yes, I will marry you." The kiss they shared then was different from the others, filled not just with passion but with promise. They held each other in the darkness of the cabin, two people who had been alone for so long finally finding their place to belong. The next morning, Isaac saddled both horses. "We are going into Lone Pine. We will find a preacher and make this official. Then we will file the marriage certificate with the county, make it legal. Once that is done, Marcus and your father have no claim on you. What if they are watching the town? That is why we go early, before they expect it. We do this fast and we do it right." They rode into Lone Pine as the sun was rising, the town just beginning to wake. Isaac led them straight to the small church where a surprised minister agreed to perform a quick ceremony. With the minister's wife and the church janitor as witnesses, Isaac Xavier and Katherine Kimball were married in the golden light of morning. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister said. "You may kiss your bride." Isaac cupped Katherine's face gently and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart soar. She was Katherine Xavier now, her own woman, bound to a man she had chosen, who had chosen her in return. They filed the marriage certificate at the county office, making sure everything was legal and recorded. The clerk, a sympathetic older woman, smiled at them. "Congratulations. You make a handsome couple." "Thank you," Katherine said, and meant it. They were preparing to leave town when Sheriff Brennan found them. "Xavier, Mrs. Xavier, I guess I should say now, you two have stirred up quite the hornet's nest. We got married this morning, Sheriff. It is all legal and filed. Marcus Thornton has no claim on Katherine anymore." "That is good, because he rode into town at first light with 6 men and a complaint that you are harboring a runaway. I have been stalling him, but he is threatening to take matters into his own hands." "Let him try," Isaac said grimly. "I would rather it not come to that. Look, I know you like your privacy up in those mountains, but maybe you two should stick close to town for a few days. Harder for him to cause trouble where there are witnesses and the law close by. We appreciate the concern, Sheriff, but we can handle ourselves." "I am sure you can. But a little caution might save everyone a lot of trouble." Sheriff Brennan tipped his hat to Katherine. "Congratulations on your marriage, madam. You picked a good man." "I know," Katherine said, smiling up at Isaac. They returned to the cabin and spent the rest of the day preparing. Isaac showed Katherine how to load and fire the rifle, insisting she needed to know how to protect herself if he was not there. She proved a decent shot, her hand steady despite her nerves. As evening fell, they sat on the porch together. Katherine leaned against Isaac's side, his arm around her shoulders, and felt at peace despite the danger they were facing. "What do you think will happen?" she asked. "Honestly, I think Marcus will make one more try. He is too prideful to let this go without a fight. But once he realizes he cannot win, he will move on. Men like that do not waste time on lost causes. And my father, your father sold you once. I doubt he has the spine to come collect you himself. He will let Marcus do his dirty work." Isaac kissed the top of her head. "Try not to worry. We will face whatever comes together." "Together," Katherine echoed. "I like the sound of that." They were still sitting there when they heard horses approaching again. This time there were more of them. Isaac stood, helping Katherine to her feet. "Inside, now." But before they could move, Marcus Thornton rode into the clearing with 8 men behind him. He looked furious, his face red with anger. "You think you are clever, Xavier, marrying her to void my claim. That contract was legal." "Maybe it was legal where you come from, Thornton, but out here we have a funny idea that women are not property. Katherine is my wife now by her choice and mine. You have no claim. Go home." "I paid good money for that girl." "Then you wasted your money. She was never yours to buy." One of the men with Marcus spoke up. "We do not have to stand here arguing. We can just take her." Isaac's hand moved to his gun. "You are welcome to try, but I guarantee some of you will not ride away from here. Is she worth dying for, boys?" The men shifted uneasily in their saddles. They had been hired for muscle, not for a gunfight with a mountain man who clearly knew how to use his weapons. Sheriff Brennan's voice cut through the tension. "That is far enough, Thornton." The sheriff rode into the clearing from the other side, Deputy Harris beside him. "This harassment ends now." "Sheriff, this man stole my property." "Katherine Xavier is not property. She is a married woman who made her own choice. The law recognizes her marriage. Your contract with her father is void. If you do not disperse right now, I will arrest you and every man here for trespassing and threatening violence." "You are taking his side." "I am taking the side of the law. Now leave or spend the night in my jail. Your choice." Marcus looked around at his hired men, saw that they were already backing their horses away, unwilling to face down both Isaac and the law. His face twisted with rage and frustration, but finally he jerked his reins around. "This is not finished," he snarled at Isaac. "Yes, it is," Isaac replied calmly. "It is finished because Katherine is no longer running. She is standing right here with her husband, protected by the law, and there is nothing you can do about it. Accept it and move on." Marcus spat on the ground, then spurred his horse back down the trail. His men followed, and soon the clearing was quiet again except for the sound of the creek. Sheriff Brennan dismounted and walked over to Isaac and Katherine. "Sorry about that. I followed them out here just in case. Thought you might need a witness to keep things from getting bloody." "We appreciate it, Sheriff," Isaac said, shaking his hand. "Truly, just doing my job. But I think that is the end of it. Marcus will slink back to Virginia City with his tail between his legs. He is not stupid enough to push this further with the law against him." He turned to Katherine. "You are a free woman, Mrs. Xavier. Live your life well." "I intend to," Katherine said, taking Isaac's hand. After the sheriff left, Katherine and Isaac stood together in the clearing as the last light faded from the sky. The danger had passed. She was free, truly free for the first time in her life. "What do we do now?" Katherine asked. Isaac smiled and pulled her close. "Now we live. We work the land, we prepare for winter, we build a life together, just like we planned." "That sounds perfect." They went inside the cabin, closing the door on the past and stepping into their future together. The weeks that followed were among the happiest Katherine had ever known. She and Isaac fell into an easy rhythm, working together during the days and spending the evenings talking, reading, and learning everything about each other. Isaac taught her how to tan hides, how to smoke meat, how to predict weather from the behavior of animals. Katherine brought her own skills to the partnership, improving the garden, organizing the cabin, and teaching Isaac some of the songs her mother had taught her long ago. They made love for the first time on a night when rain drummed on the roof and the fireplace crackled warmly. Isaac was so gentle with her, treating her like something precious, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Katherine had been terrified that after everything with her father and Marcus, she would be afraid of a man's touch. But with Isaac, there was no fear, only love and trust and a growing passion that surprised her with its intensity. "I love you," Isaac whispered against her hair as they lay tangled together afterward. "I did not think I would ever say those words to anyone, but I love you, Katherine Xavier." "I love you too," Katherine replied, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "More than I ever thought possible." As summer gave way to fall, they prepared for winter. Isaac showed Katherine how to preserve food, how to lay in supplies, how to make the cabin comfortable for the cold months ahead. They worked together to stock the root cellar with vegetables from the garden, to smoke and salt meat, to gather firewood until they had stacks taller than Katherine's head. One afternoon in late September, as they were harvesting the last of the vegetables, Katherine felt an odd flutter in her stomach. She had been feeling slightly ill in the mornings for the past week, and certain smells made her nauseous in a way they never had before. She paused in her work, her hand going to her belly, and suddenly she knew. "Isaac," she said quietly. He looked up from where he was digging potatoes. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Actually, everything is very right. Isaac, I think I am pregnant." Isaac dropped the shovel and crossed to her in 3 long strides. "Are you certain?" "Not completely, but all the signs are there. The morning sickness, the fatigue, the way certain foods smell wrong. My mother was pregnant twice that I remember before she died, and she had the same symptoms." A grin spread across Isaac's face, transforming him from serious mountain man to delighted soon-to-be father. He picked Katherine up and spun her around, making her laugh. "We are having a baby. A child. Our child. If I am right, the baby should come sometime in the spring. We will need to prepare. Make a cradle, get supplies for an infant, figure out how to manage with a baby in the cabin." Isaac set her down gently, as if she had suddenly become fragile. "We have all winter to prepare, and Katherine, I promise I will take care of both of you. You and our child will never want for anything I can provide." "I know," Katherine said, cupping his face. "I have never doubted that for a moment." They spent the winter preparing for the baby's arrival. Isaac built a beautiful cradle from pine, carving simple flowers into the headboard. Katherine sewed tiny gowns and blankets from fabric Isaac had bought on a quick trip to town. They talked about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about their hopes for the future. The winter was harsh, with snow piling up to the windowsills and temperatures dropping so low that the creek froze solid. But inside the cabin, wrapped in furs and warmed by the fire, Katherine felt safer and happier than she had ever felt in her life. She and Isaac spent the long evenings reading aloud to each other, playing cards, and talking about everything and nothing. When Katherine's belly began to swell with the growing child, Isaac became even more protective, insisting on doing all the heavy chores and fretting if she so much as looked tired. Katherine found it endearing, even when it became slightly annoying. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one evening when he had insisted she sit while he cooked dinner. "Women have babies all the time. I can still work." "I know you can, but you do not have to. Let me take care of you, Katherine, please." She could not argue with the earnest plea in his eyes. "All right, but if you start trying to carry me up to the loft, I am putting my foot down." "Understood." Isaac kissed her nose. "No carrying unless there is a bear attack or a flood or some other emergency. We live in the mountains." "There are always bears." "Then I reserve the right to carry you in case of bear attacks." Katherine laughed and pulled him down for a proper kiss. "Fine. In case of bear attacks, you may carry me." Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting to reveal green grass and wildflowers. Catherine's belly was huge now, and she moved carefully, aware of the precious cargo she carried. Isaac had made arrangements with a midwife in Lone Pine to come when the baby's time arrived, and they had a signal system worked out where he would ride down and fetch her. The baby decided to come on a bright April morning. Katherine woke with contractions, and Isaac immediately rode for the midwife. The woman, an experienced grandmother named Mrs. Prout, arrived within 2 hours and took charge of the situation with calm efficiency. "First babies take their time," she told Katherine. "You have hours ahead of you, dear. Just breathe through the pains and let your body do its work." Isaac paced outside like a caged mountain lion until Mrs. Prout took pity on him and let him come in. He held Katherine's hand through the contractions, wiped her forehead with cool water, and whispered encouragement even though his face was pale with worry. "You are doing so well," he told her. "You are so strong, Katherine. Just a little longer." The baby finally arrived as the sun was setting, filling the cabin with lusty cries. "It is a boy," Mrs. Prout announced, wrapping the infant in a soft blanket. "A big, healthy boy." Katherine held her son for the first time and felt tears stream down her face. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair like his father and tiny fists that waved in the air. Isaac knelt beside the bed, his eyes wet as he looked at his wife and child. "What should we name him?" Katherine asked. "I was thinking about my father," Isaac said softly. "His name was James. But we can choose something else if you prefer." "James Xavier," Katherine tested the name. "I like it. What do you think, little one? Do you like the name James?" The baby made a small noise and settled against her chest, and they took that as approval. Mrs. Prout stayed for 3 days, making sure both Katherine and baby James were healthy before she left. Isaac paid her generously and extracted a promise that she would come back in a month to check on them. Life with a baby was both wonderful and exhausting. James was a good baby, but he needed constant care. Katherine nursed him while Isaac took over even more of the household chores, refusing to let her do anything beyond caring for the baby until she had fully recovered. "I feel useless," Katherine complained one afternoon as Isaac prepared dinner while she sat nursing James. "You are feeding our son. You are recovering from bringing a new life into this world. You are not useless. You are essential." Isaac stirred the pot over the fire. "Besides, I like taking care of you. It makes me feel useful." Katherine smiled at him, this strong, capable man who had turned out to be such a gentle husband and devoted father. "I love you, Isaac Xavier. Have I told you that today? Only twice. I could stand to hear it again. I love you. Thank you for finding me in that barn, for bringing me here, for building this life with me." Isaac came over and kissed her forehead, careful not to disturb the nursing baby. "Thank you for staying, for choosing me, for giving me a family I thought I would never have." As James grew, the cabin filled with new sounds. Baby laughter, the rattle of wooden toys Isaac carved, Katherine singing lullabies. Isaac proved to be a wonderful father, patient and loving, carrying James on his shoulders when they went to check the traps, teaching him words and showing him wonders of the forest as soon as he was old enough to understand. When James was 6 months old, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their second child, a daughter they named Hannah after Isaac's lost sister, arrived the following spring. She had Catherine's blonde hair and blue eyes, and she wrapped her father around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. James grew tall and strong like his father, learning to hunt and trap and survive in the wilderness. Hannah proved to be curious and fearless, always exploring and asking questions. They had one more child, another boy they named Samuel, who had his mother's sunny disposition and his father's determination. Katherine sometimes thought about her old life in Virginia City, about her father and Marcus Thornton. She heard through occasional visits to Lone Pine that her father had died a few years after she ran away, his liver finally giving out from too much whiskey. Marcus had moved on to Nevada, last anyone heard. She felt nothing when she learned these things, only gratitude that she had escaped that life. One evening when James was 10, Hannah 8, and Samuel 5, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset. Katherine leaned against Isaac's shoulder, his arm around her waist, while the children played with a puppy Isaac had brought home from a trip to town. "You ever regret it?" Katherine asked quietly. "Giving up your solitude for all this chaos?" Isaac looked at their children, at the life they had built, and shook his head. "Not for 1 second. I thought I wanted to be alone, but I was wrong. I did not want to be alone. I wanted to be safe. Wanted to protect myself from being hurt again. But you taught me that safety and loneliness are not the same as happiness." "You saved my life that night in the barn," Katherine said. "In more ways than one. You gave me a home, a family, a life I chose. You gave me everything." "We saved each other," Isaac corrected, pulling her closer. "You brought this cabin to life. You made me remember what it means to be part of something bigger than myself. You gave me a reason to be more than just a man surviving in the wilderness." James ran up to the porch, the puppy in his arms. "Papa, Mama, look, I taught him to sit." "Well done, son," Isaac said, ruffling his hair. "You are a good teacher." Katherine watched her family with a heart full of love and gratitude. She thought about that night 13 years ago when she had collapsed in the hayloft, desperate and terrified, thinking she would rather die than return to the life her father had planned for her. She thought about Isaac finding her, about his kindness and protection, about the way he had given her space to choose her own future. She thought about the cabin he had built long before he met her, how it had been just a shelter for a solitary man. Now it was filled with laughter and love, toys scattered on the floor, crayon drawings pinned to the walls, evidence of life being lived fully and joyfully. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, noticing her faraway expression. "I am thinking about how lucky I am. How all the terrible things that happened led me here to you, to this family. How sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to the best things we never knew we needed." Isaac kissed her temple. "I was thinking the same thing. If I had not gone into town that specific day, if I had not decided to check on that noise in the barn, I would have missed meeting you. I would still be alone up here, thinking I was content. But you found me sleeping in the hayloft," Katherine said softly, "and you built me a life. And you asked me to share your name, and I said yes. Best decision I ever made asking you. Best decision I ever made saying yes." Hannah and Samuel joined James on the porch, all 3 children piling around their parents, the puppy barking excitedly. Isaac gathered them all close, his family, the thing he had never thought he wanted but could not imagine living without. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the Xavier family sat together on the porch of the cabin that had become a home. The wilderness stretched around them, wild and beautiful, but inside their little clearing, they had built something civilized and precious. A family bound by choice and love and the courage to believe in second chances. Katherine looked up at the man who had saved her all those years ago and saw their whole life reflected in his eyes. The struggles they had overcome, the children they had raised, the partnership they had built. She saw years stretching ahead of them, watching their children grow and start families of their own, growing old together in this cabin in the mountains. "I love you," she said, "not for the first time and not for the last." "I love you too," Isaac replied, his voice warm with contentment. "My Katherine, my wife, my home." The stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, and the family eventually moved inside for dinner. The cabin glowed with lamplight and warmth, a beacon of love and safety in the vast wilderness. And if anyone had passed by that night, they would have seen through the window a family gathered around a table, holding hands and saying grace, grateful for the food they had and the love they shared. Katherine often told her children the story of how she and their father met, though she left out the darker details until they were older. She told them about being lost and afraid, about their father's kindness, about choosing love and freedom. She wanted them to understand that family was not always about blood, that home was not always where you were born, that sometimes the best things in life came from having the courage to choose your own path. Isaac taught the children to respect the wilderness, to live in harmony with nature, to be self-sufficient and strong. But he also taught them gentleness, how to be kind even when being strong, how to protect those weaker than themselves. He taught them that real strength came from choosing love over fear, from building rather than destroying. The children grew, as children do. James became a skilled hunter and tracker, eventually building his own cabin nearby and starting his own family. Hannah surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, moving to Lone Pine but visiting often with tales of her students. Samuel stayed closest to home, taking over more of the homestead duties as Isaac grew older, eventually bringing home a wife of his own. Katherine and Isaac grew old together in the cabin he had built before he knew she existed. Their hair turned gray, their faces lined with years, but their love remained as strong as it had been that first night when he found her sleeping in the hayloft. They sat together on the porch every evening, watching sunsets and counting blessings, grateful for every day they had been given together. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the cabin for a celebration. The clearing was filled with people, with love, with laughter. Katherine looked around at everyone who had come from their union, all these lives that would not have existed if she had not run away that night, if Isaac had not checked the barn, if they had not chosen each other. 30 years, Isaac marveled, his arm around his wife. Seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. Best 30 years of my life, Katherine said. Worth every hard moment, every struggle, every challenge. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. So would I, Isaac agreed. Finding you was like finding the missing piece of myself I did not know was gone. That night, after all the guests had left and they were alone again in their cabin, Katherine and Isaac lay in the bed he had built 30 years ago, listening to the familiar sounds of the creek and the forest. "Are you happy?" Isaac asked, a question he still asked regularly even after all these years. "Completely," Katherine replied without hesitation. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible. You know, I built this cabin thinking it would be my refuge from the world. A place to hide from pain and disappointment, but you turned it into something better. You turned it into a home, a place where love lives." Katherine snuggled closer to him. "We built it together. The cabin was just logs until we filled it with life." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had done thousands of nights before. And if the ghosts of their younger selves could have seen them, those frightened, wounded people who had found each other in a barn on a desperate night. They would have been amazed at the life that grew from that chance meeting. Years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges as all years do. Isaac's joints grew stiff with age and Catherine's eyesight dimmed, but their children and grandchildren surrounded them with love and care, repaying the devotion that had been shown to them. The cabin remained at the center of the family, a touchstone and gathering place, filled with memories and love. When Isaac finally passed at the age of 78, it was peacefully in his sleep, with Catherine beside him as she had been for 46 years of marriage. The family mourned him deeply, this strong, gentle man who had built a legacy of love in the wilderness. They buried him in a spot he had chosen years before, on a hillside overlooking the cabin and the meadow where wildflowers bloomed every spring. Catherine lived for 3 more years after Isaac's death. She remained in the cabin, cared for by Samuel and his family, spending her days surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told stories about Isaac, keeping his memory alive, making sure everyone knew what a remarkable man he had been. She passed quietly one spring morning, and the family laid her to rest beside Isaac under the swaying pines. On her headstone, beneath her name and dates, they carved the words she had requested. She chose freedom and found love. The cabin remained in the family, passed down through generations, each one adding their own memories to its walls while honoring the love story that had begun there. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren heard the tale of Catherine who ran away to freedom and Isaac who found her sleeping in the hayloft, who built her a life and asked her to share his name. And in the quiet moments, when the sun set behind the mountains and the creek sang its eternal song, those who lived in the cabin sometimes felt the presence of that original love, the foundation upon which everything else had been built. They felt Catherine's courage and Isaac's strength, the choice they had made to build something beautiful in the wilderness, the legacy of love that proved family is not always where you start, but where you choose to belong. The story of the mountain man and the runaway bride became family legend, told and retold, embellished and cherished. But at its heart remained the simple, powerful truth that 2 people who had been broken by life found each other in the darkness and chose to build something whole and beautiful together. That love, when freely chosen and carefully tended, can heal old wounds and create new joy. That sometimes the best homes are not the ones we are born into, but the ones we build with our own hands and fill with our own hearts. And in the mountains of California, in a cabin built by strong hands and filled with love, that truth lived on, generation after generation. A testament to a night when everything changed because a mountain man checked his neighbor's barn and found a woman sleeping in the hayloft, desperate and afraid but not yet defeated. He gave her shelter, built her a life, and asked her to share his name. She said yes, and from that yes, everything else followed.